Plan for America podcast is a show dedicated to national unity through prosperity that's achieved by free market capitalism. We believe that a rising tide does lift all boats. This show will be positive, solution-oriented, and nonpartisan. Our only agenda is for the prosperity of our country and her people. All are welcome here. This show will not be argumentative or incendiary, sensational, or polarizing and divisive. What we are presenting is a positive solution to one of America's greatest problems.
This is Tom Cellucci. Thanks so much for inviting Travis and I. By way of background, I'm a laser physicist who went to business school. After I sold my fourth high-tech turnaround company, I was appointed the first chief commercialization officer in the United States of America by President George W. Bush. And then I was reappointed by President Barack Obama. I currently still have clearances with the current President of the United States, President Biden, as well as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Most of my time was spent at the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, as well as the White House. And if you were to say what was the most common element of working at both of those institutions, it was innovative public-private partnerships. And so Plan for America, when I met you several years ago and you talked to me about it, this is exactly something that fills within the realm of innovative public-private partnerships, which I'm happy to say the government is doing more and more of. We've seen a lot in the media about SpaceX and Elon Musk. Well, that's an innovative public-private partnership. He gets a lot of press because he's Elon Musk, but there are many of those that occur with the government today, which is wonderful. Emmett Harvest is a firm that the fifth turnaround I'm working on, Bravitech, was approached because they had very innovative patent pending technologies to assist in high yield extraction of rare earth elements, metals, etc., which are of paramount importance to the United States to keep its competitive advantage, enabling us to make semiconductors, certain types of components for our military systems. And we were so fortunate to get someone like Travis Nagle, who will introduce himself, to lead the company as its CEO. He's an extraordinarily gifted person in terms of the engineering technology involved with rare earth elements and metals, as well as someone with an impressive background and set of credentials from a business school, which he can tell you about. So that's it for me.
All right, well, great. Well, thank you so much for that, Tom. I want to just kick us off by saying this is Plan for America podcast. I'm your host, Eric Nagle, and I'm very pleased to have joining us today our special guests, Tom Cellucci and Travis Nagle. And thank you for giving that background on yourself, Tom. And Travis, I'd invite you to give your background too, and prior to coming to Emmett Harvest.
Yeah, you bet. Oh, thank you very much, Eric and Tom, for that intro. So, Eric, I by way of education and background, I'm a mining engineer out of Montana, licensed. I've worked, a mile deep and in a whole variety of different locations. Most of them have been in very strategic, what we other circles call very strategic locations, but heavy experience and background in the Western United States, Russia, China, Kazakhstan, and I've had a few spells above the Arctic Circle on some industrial developments, if you will. So my business school is out of University of Chicago Booth, which really particularly honed, let's just say, some of my industrial background, along with the business, pretty strong business sense. especially on a cross-border standpoint. So much of my career has been in cross-border strategic mining joint ventures. And by cross-border, not just like the typical international investor, local partner, but I've been doing a number of things that are, public-private partnerships, state to state, et cetera, okay? About 2 years ago, I achieved a high watermark being Moscow, Russia-based, and 2 years ago made the strategic decision to return back to the DC area. And that's where Tom and his team found me in my background, and we started discussing a bit on the the Emmett Harvest technology. And me being I'm a natural skeptic because, and I have to be because I'm an industrialist. And so for me, typically innovation carries a different type of risk, especially in implementing. But Tom and his team and the background of the team are top caliber. And, we can get into that here a bit after the intro, but let's just say Tom and the Emmett Harvest team got my attention in a way that not many do. And so for the past 2 years, we've been working very heavily and diligently on Emmett Harvest.
Well, very good. Well, Tom, you're one of the more bipartisan people I think I know, and your background certainly speaks to that. And so that's one reason we're so happy to have you guys on the show. And either one of you can answer this question. But when we talk about rare earths, I think a lot of people hear about that in the news, but may not really know what it means. What are rare earth metals and why are they so important to our economy?
Travis, go ahead.
Great. Well, first of all, rare earth metals, it's a terrible misnomer because rare earth metals are very common. They're located everywhere across the crust of the earth. But what makes them very rare is being in concentrations suitable and adequate enough for commercial extraction, okay? And I want to mention there's a few different waves here. So, rare earths have been around, they've been known for a long time, but the specific applications on these things, each of the elements have very specific qualities that are not replicated in other elements used within industry, okay? And this touches into a lot of areas where Tom has a very deep experience, but that goes into electronics, satellite, phones. You look at the whole EV, electric vehicle space, along with the defense sectors. And there are so many applications to rare earths that are very specific and let's just say kind of closed type applications where, if one were engaged looking at like, for instance, copper or platinum, you as a very straightforward application, the whole number of areas that everyone understands very clearly. Whereas, you get into satellite type applications, and that's very much a user specified need. And that ties into the security of supply chains. So you don't just go over to the London Metals Exchange and, pick up your neodymium. You actually, the user of that specific rare earth, there's a counterparty bearing of trust and security that needs to be in place with a lot of these rare earth supply chains.
Mm. And as I understand it, or as at least it's portrayed in the media, China has the bulk of the world's, at least maybe concentrations of these metals, or maybe easily accessible metals, and Emmett Harvest is trying to find sources for the United States. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So speaking of China, China has had a very long-range view on these things. They've actually been active for decades in securing supply chain on rare earths and other strategic metals. Okay, and Tom and myself have worked, with Chinese across the table on various things, and they do have a long view. And so with rare earths, speaking specifically around rare earths, yes, they do have rare earth deposits within China, but they, for the last 2 decades, they have been securing on a commercial basis rare earth deposits globally. So not only geographically do they control rare earths, but they've gone into commercial agreements, within Africa, Eurasia, South America. And then they have also draped on the technologies to process and refine these things. So basically the full supply chain they have secured.
Mm-hmm. And recently I was reading something about Greenland. They had a deal with Greenland and then the government collapsed there. Can you enlighten us on that real quickly?
That's actually a great example. And this gets into some of the counterparty dynamics. Okay, so you have China entering into Greenland to secure rare earth supply. And I have no special knowledge around this, but you do see certain governments when they are engaging with China, they realize, they're not just entering into a transaction on a commercial basis, but there are other implications in and around engaging with China proper on some of these strategic deposits.
So I guess in short, does the United States have anything to worry about?
I would say absolutely yes. and that's why we're here.
Not only absolutely yes, but there have been executive directives, for example, from President Trump and now President Biden to look at this very carefully. Travis did the yeoman's work on this, but we just, as of last week, finished a presidential white paper to President Biden. And you will see across both administrations, forget about the politics. It's the fact of the matter is our country needs to develop a sustainable competitive advantage in this area, or we will fall behind in getting the raw materials necessary for semiconductor production, for particular components, as I said before, for aircraft, satellites, things of this nature. So it is a strategic push by the Biden administration. And in fact, it's been something that the DoD has been quite concerned about for many years. And because they bear the burden in the delays of some of the equipment we're trying to build based on not getting adequate supply. And as Travis mentioned, secure supply of these raw materials and a supply chain that they can depend on.
Fascinating discussion, gentlemen. We're going to take a break right here. We'll be right back with Plan for America podcast. If you like what you're hearing and want to learn more about Plan for America, visit our website at www.planforamerica.us. There's an extensive Q&A section there. And if you don't see a question you have, then please ask us by email. You can order our book, Plan for America, How to Place the American Dream on a Sure Foundation Forever. That can be found on Amazon.com. You can like us on Facebook. And if you really like what you're hearing, you're welcome to contribute through our website. Plan for America is a nonprofit 501c3 organization, and all contributions are tax deductible. Welcome back to Plan for America podcast. I'm Eric Nagle. Our guest today, Tom Cellucci and Travis Nagle with Emmett Harvest. We're talking about rare earth metals and securing a supply for the United States, and fascinating discussion. Travis, if someone wanted to find out more information about what you're doing, where would someone go for that?
Yes. First of all, they can reach us on our website, emmettharvest.com, along with reaching out to me by email, travis@redhillglobal.com.
Okay, and Emmett is E-M-M-E-T, one T in Emmett Harvest.
Correct.
All right. Anything else you'd wrap up with that? It's not just rare earth metals, but it's sustainability. It's some other things too. Is that right?
Yeah, Eric. This is the big punch on this. And this is what gets me really excited. Okay, so keeping in mind my background's in gold, precious, strategic metals. We have three converging waves, let's just say globally, but especially in the U.S. and with the current administration's view on things. One with battery metals. And the big, huge global shift into electric vehicles and the battery metal space. 2, we have the rare earths and supply chain resilience and security. But then 3, the environmental and social governance, the ESG push, whether, they're the one thing I need to mention, the Emmett harvest technology is incredibly beneficial to the environment compared to standard mining processes. And I'm very familiar with standing mining processes. That's what I do. What Emmett Harvest Tech can deliver these battery and rare earth metals at a fraction of the carbon footprint. And I think that's very relevant, especially with the decarbonization of multiple industries that we're in the midst of right now. And I want to be on the leading edge of that.
Well, I take great comfort in the fact that 2 very smart people like you guys are thinking about this on behalf of our country, because that's a very important thing to secure those supply chains. So I wish you all success in your endeavor. Want to pivot here to Plan for America. Tom, we met you, I believe it was 2018 at Freedom Fest when you first came across this idea. And I wanted to kind of ask you what intrigued you about it.
Well, what intrigued me, first of all, it was just wonderful to meet you and listen to you, but I'm a huge advocate of innovative public-private partnerships. The government is large. The government can do a lot of things the private sector can't do, but vice versa. When you look at certain things, for example, the commercialization of technologies, depending upon the technology, the government has learned that the government can't do all things at all times, and money is just not enough. And there is example after example that I could point to where when I was associated with Homeland Security in the White House, we were developing at a fraction of the time commercialized products and services to assist in the security of our country, to protect our people and our property, done in a fraction of the time because of the private sector, if government had undertaken it itself. In your Plan for America, the private sector, folks like yourself, have in-depth experience in helping create financial networks and supply, etc., whereas the US government may not be as adroit as we all want it to be. And that's okay, but you need to work together. Let me give you a typical example. Cybersecurity. The 5th turnaround I'm working on is a global security company. And we just got a very broad patent in cybersecurity to protect attachments to emails. That's very broad. And the fact of the matter is, the United States government does rely on the private sector to help them with cybersecurity issues. That's why there are alliances, there are committees, and there's more interaction that most people know going on, because the pace that the private sector can execute is far faster than that of the public sector. I used to go to meetings at the Department of Defense, and I'd be with the Secretary of Defense, and he'd say, "Now, Tommy, you make sure to ask the questions." And there would be people up there talking about getting a prototype in 15 years, dealing with a cyber product. And I would just shake my head and say, 15 years? We need things in less than 15 months. And that's the kind of time frame the private sector works on. We developed products and services, I said at the US Department of Homeland Security, that really saved lives, protected people, protected property, that the government would still be working on. So in the old days, it used to be embarrassing that someone would ask for help in the private sector. It's not so anymore. And it really dealt with a change of the climate and the leadership. And someone like President Biden and his team understand the utility of public-private partnerships. Let's talk about infrastructure. I wrote a book about 2 years ago on innovative public-private partners with infrastructure and key resources. So what you're advocating, Plan for America, is working with the government side by side, but handling the things that you know best and better, quite frankly, than the government. Um, Government is very often used and very effectively to start new industries, for example. I'm a laser physicist by background who went to business school. We would not have lasers today if it were not for the government putting in all of the money it took to develop laser technology. We don't need to do this in what you're talking about for Plan of America. You already have the tools, the methods, the metrics to help our government. That's why I'm such a believer in it. And because in working together, we can get things done with the speed of execution that either side can't do without the other.
Well, I think you bring up a great point there, and I think maybe Operation Warp Speed is another example of the private healthcare industry delivering something in
Exactly.
record time like that. And of course, Plan for America is very large. It includes healthcare and retirement.
Yes.
So just to refresh our listeners here and our viewers, it would start off with contract law as opposed to legislation, because that would be harder to change. It would be a contract among the federal governments, the state governments, and a private trust to be created by this contract. And then at that point, U.S. citizens would have the option to opt into the system, by which 15.3% of the payroll taxes that are now going to Social Security and Medicare would be in a private account in their own name that would be invested in an all market index. So no decisions would have to be made, no picking winners and losers, and an all market index would be almost cost free to administer. And then the funding mechanism would be the 2% fee that the trust would charge to, one, pay off the current retirees and make sure all the promises are kept, and then eventually to retire our massive debt and unfunded liabilities. And depending upon what assumptions you make about market returns, the lines would cross, those liabilities would be gone, if enacted today, somewhere between 2054 and 2071. So that's where the light is at the end of the tunnel, so to speak, that there is hope for, there actually is a way to get rid of this massive debt that's burdening us, because if we don't get rid of it, we're not going to have low interest rates forever. And Tom, you know what happens if interest rates rise and what impact that will have on the federal budget. It could crush us. And it could also have national security implications as well, which you both I'm sure can speak to.
Right, and also to your point, reading all of your materials, it is not political at all. And that's what I love about it. It's to get a job done. The government is good about providing requirements, detailed operational requirements, and concept of operations, which you've already helped them with. And working together, we look at various solutions to solve those problems. This is a well-known issue. And what I also like about it is it's not a political answer to anything. It's a financial answer, which is something that people can rally around.
Well, we think there's something that would appeal in it to all points of the political spectrum. Like, for example, a true liberal would like the fact that, in effect, it's a single payer healthcare system. It's a private one, but it's single payer. And that's what they've been looking at for a long time. From a conservative standpoint, it would lessen the size of government. With government kind of out of the retirement and healthcare business, it'd be much easier to balance the budgets going forward. We've seen that in our models that we've simulated. So we think there's appeal to all sides. And then also from back to the Democratic or the more liberal side, the Wall Street so-called 1% will be working for the little guy. Every American would have ownership in corporate America and be vested in the success of corporate America. So from that standpoint, we think there are a lot of things. Travis, I want to bring you in too, if there's anything that catches your eye about Plan for America you want to comment about.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's with regard to Plan for America, as you mentioned, it's apolitical. It touches in with many different constituents in ways that are, I guess, tailored to, specific needs both short term and in the long term. And from that standpoint, I actually think that it may not seem to have a direct connection, but what we're doing here at Emmett Harvest actually ties in much in the same way from a natural resource space in being able to provide for the needs, whether it's on the defense, whether it's in electric vehicles, whether it's let's say gold. Okay, there are just very specific and tailored constituent needs that I love about Plan for America. Don't touch on politics. Mm-hmm. And it really also ties in with what Tom has been doing and what we are doing with Emmett Harvest too. So as you mentioned, there's many different things. You can't, I think necessarily you don't map it out linearly, right? Because it's all based on one, economics, but also the needs of people and where they're coming from. And so what I actually like about Plan for America is it's dynamic.
Well, thank you very much. It is a piece to the puzzle. You guys have another piece of the puzzle. That's why I'm glad you're both able to be guests today. And of course, we'd welcome your suggestions of who else would make good guests for our show. Those of, healthcare experts, budget experts, people like that, or other people working in cutting edge things as you are. We want to educate our viewers and our listeners to know about those as well, because we're trying to bring, as we spoke before the show, Tom, nonpartisan solutions to the problems facing our nation. And these are just a couple examples. So
thank you so much for having us on today. We really appreciate it, Eric.
Yes.
Absolutely. And anything you guys want to add to wrap up? Because like I say, we'll certainly put up your website and your contact information. Oh yeah. I also do rapid fire at the end. I try to get you guys people to know our guests a little better. And Tom, maybe you could tell us about other political figures who you are maybe connected with or know or related to, perhaps.
Well, I'm very honored to be on the board of the World Bank. So I have traveled around the world before the pandemic struck. So I'm very happy to say that I've interacted closely with people around the world. And the thing for me is I love America, and I don't care if the person's Republican, Democrat, Independent. I just have enjoyed in my life meeting so many people. There are still political figures that want to get the job done because they love the country. And, it's very hard to listen to media today because before the one party's done, the other party is, ripping it apart. I would like to advocate for more listening than talking these days. And there are still some terrific people in government and in politics that are there to get the job done for the people.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. That concludes another episode of Plan for America podcast. Join us next time when I'm sure we'll have another amazing guest. Thank you. If you like what you're hearing and want to learn more about Plan for America, visit our website at www.planforamerica.us. There's an extensive Q&A section there. And if you don't see a question you have, then please ask us by email. You can order our book, Plan for America, How to Place the American Dream on a Sure Foundation Forever. That can be found on Amazon.com. You can like us on Facebook. And if you really like what you're hearing, you're welcome to contribute through our website. Plan for America is a nonprofit 501c3 organization, and all contributions are tax deductible.